Hey everyone, thanks for joining. My name is Dana Valletta, Developer Relations at Odos. Today we're going to be going over our upcoming hackathon partnership with QuickNode. So let's get right to it. In this video, we're going to go over what Odos does, what we offer the market. We'll go over the scope of this hackathon, the APIs that you'll be using. This will be the focus of our event. We're going to go over some code examples and some use cases, and then we'll end with some resources for you to reference as you build it over the next few days. So for those who are unfamiliar, Odos is a smart order routing and DeFi abstraction platform. It's not simply a DEX aggregator, unlike traditional platforms that rely on limited linear pathfinding. Our algorithm leverages over 900 liquidity sources, including decentralized exchanges, on-chain order books, private liquidity through RFQ systems, and others to explore nonlinear routing options. And we do this in addition to utilizing multiple intermediary tokens, which allows us to offer much better rates than our competitors, especially for long tail assets or particularly large transactions. We're currently on 13 chains. Like I said, over 900 liquidity sources. We support over 55,000 tokens on our managed whitelist. We average about 5 billion in trading volume every month, and we've optimized about 44 billion in total transaction volume for our user base. Odos has a wide range of products and services. We recently released a QuickNode Marketplace add-on for our token pricing API. We recently released limit orders, a swap widget. We have our new simple swap, gasless and slippage-free swaps. But the scope of this hackathon is going to be focusing on our two API products, our flagship API products. So we have our Smart Order Router API, which takes advantage of the nonlinear algorithm that we just described. And then we also have our token pricing API, which is the DeFi pricing engine that powers our smart order router algorithm with live token prices. The token pricing API, Odos offers what we describe as DeFi native pricing. DeFi native prices reflect on-chain block by block updates aggregated through all of our configured liquidity sources for real actionable prices using executable call data. Most token price API providers in the market, such as CoinMarketCap or CoinGecko, have data refresh rates of about 30 seconds to 1 minute. So it doesn't sound like much, but if you're an application operating on an L2, and you have block times of say 2 seconds, then you're missing out on at least 15 blocks of price action and state changes between updates. Our token pricing is block by block updates to give us the most accurate price available. So the scope of our hackathon is using one or both of these APIs to create an application which can really showcase innovative use cases that can fully harness the capabilities of these APIs to create new markets, create new products, or just otherwise transformative solutions. Excuse me. So we have $10,000 in total prizes that we're going to be giving away to 3 winners. Our first place is 5,000 US. The second place is 3,000, and the third place is 2,000. So the Odos Smart Order Router API, the interface is very intuitive, very easy to use. I'm not going to get into too much detail here. I'd urge you to look at our documentation. We have like an interactive Swagger instance for you to review all of the parameters. But generally speaking, at a high level, the API returns executable call data based on the inputs that you've provided, such as input token, output tokens, your receiver address, and it will return call data that can be executed either via ETH send transaction or a low-level call from a smart contract or you could simulate the transaction with an ETH call. But that's the high level overview. The token pricing API, again, is the pricing engine that powers the smart order router API. But it gives us a little bit more verbose detail than just single token prices. Again, I urge you to look at the documentation. The product is straightforward, but our documentation is comprehensive. If you have any questions, we're going to have a channel dedicated to the Odos QuickNode Hackathon partnership within the QuickNode Discord. So if you have any questions, I'll be there. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to me in Odos Discord. I'm there all day, every day. If you have any questions, just feel free to reach out or open a support ticket, and we'll get you taken care of. Our documentation portal, again, has Swagger for you to review the individual parameters of each API call. We also have 2 quick start guides that have some code examples in both JavaScript and Python to help you get started and to get some example on paper. We also, like I had mentioned earlier, we have our token pricing API marketplace add-on, which is within the scope of this hackathon. If you're an existing QuickNode customer and you'd like to enable our token pricing API on your existing RPC endpoint and use the RPC method through your existing node endpoint, feel free to go to the marketplace and search for just token pricing API and enable it within your account, and you will be good to go. We also have, of course, a public GitHub repo for you to review if you have any questions. And of course, we have the link to Discord in the corner. But for the purposes of this hackathon, the quick start guides are going to be most beneficial to start with. But like I said, if you have any other questions or if there's anything else I can do for you, please feel free to reach out into Discord and we'll get you taken care of. All right. So I've created a few examples to show very basic functionality of how you would use the APIs that are within the scope of this hackathon. And again, that is the Smart Order Routing API and the Token Pricing API. Now, the bounty is applicable to either one of those APIs or both of them in your application, but you're certainly not limited to those. You could use the information endpoint, excuse me. You could also use the token pricing API through the QuickNode Marketplace add-on that we've recently released. The functionality that I could show you in our script is the same functionality that would be accessible to you over your RPC node URL using the JSON RPC method. Okay, so the functionality is the same if you were to use the add-on product, and it would also apply to the bounty. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Full disclosure, the examples that I'm going to show you are the same code examples from our tutorials that are available on our API documentation portal, and that is here at our quick start guides link. Here, a bit more of a verbose explanation of each of the parameters. However, at our API endpoint documentation is where we host Swagger. If you're familiar, you can expand any one of these panels, and again, you'll get a verbose explanation of each of those parameters as you're building your quote. So, okay, let's go ahead and take a look. So I have 3 scripts here to outline the basic functionality that most use cases use Odos for, and that's pricing tokens on chain through very highly accurate mechanisms that refresh block by block. We use the API to quote a transaction. And this is simply to get an idea of the price impact, the routes available, the liquidity available. But this is separate from executing the transaction. So you may use the quote to validate ideas in your application. You may use the quote to monitor for a particular price action. But when you're using the quote API, rest assured that you're not actually executing any of the transaction. You'll simply get parameters returned, such as this here. Now, let's look in another tab. Okay, if we were to take a look here, again, the API is extremely intuitive, straightforward, and easy to use. We simply need to define our chain ID, our input tokens, the amount, fixed integer position, okay, the output tokens, the proportion, if you were to use a multi-output swap, then you would use this parameter to break that output into equal proportions. The user address is, in most cases, the sender. However, you do have the option of delegating the recipient to another address, and you can you could do that right here. Excuse me. However, it has to be delegated from this address. Okay, and you cannot replace user address in flight. It has to be either the tokens are sent to this address, or this address is entered here with the recipient being a separate address. But it has to be, this has to be the sender. The slippage limit percent is straightforward. You want to set your percentage to something realistic, but you also want to limit your risk of exposure, especially when doing stable swaps. Referral code is, for your reference, it's a way that Odos uses, a way that Odos tracks usage in the field. We have some partners that we want to quantify the traffic that they're sending, the volume that we're sending. So we have a referral code program. It's a separate subdomain on the site where you can create a referral code, and then you can start to include that in your payload. Again, though, it's not really within the scope of this hackathon. You could safely ignore it. So while in our documentation it is recommended, you don't necessarily need to use it if you're not planning to partner with Odos. Disable RFQs. This is in reference to RFQs as a liquidity source. If you don't know what this is, you can safely ignore it. Compact is a parameter that could be very useful to you. So by default, we compress the parameters and call data to save on gas. Okay, so that's why compact is set to true in nearly all cases. However, we could disable that compression. Okay, it's not going to decode the call data in flight for you. But if you were to set compact to false, the compression would be disabled in such a way that you could then use the native Solidity ABI to decode that call data, and you would get the same parameters that the transaction executed with, that it was assembled with. So I know we have some users that want to they want to have like checks in place before a transaction is committed. This is a way that you can do it. You set compact to false, and you use the native contract ABI that's available on Etherscan or whatever have you to decode it, and you can do all that client side off chain. All right. Um, Again, I was just going to show the basic overview on these examples. With such prizes at stake, I don't want to steer people in one direction versus the other. I just wanted to go over a few things that were not included in our API documentation. One of those is the path ID. There's some misconception within the community sometimes regarding path ID. This is not something that we can go back and reference and then expect to be able to use the same routes that this quote was going to use. Okay, this is simply a unique reference for this path, this route at this time. Okay, it's not something that you would be able to reuse, so to speak. It's not like a snapshot of a particular route that you could go back to. I just figured I would mention that. So, the smart order routing API is straightforward. Most people use V2 or assemble and just back and forth. However, I don't want us to skip over the ZAP endpoint. If you're not familiar with the term ZAP, it's moving in and out of liquidity pools directly through atomic swaps. So it's the exact same functionality as the other endpoint. It just has that additional feature where you can go in and out of those LPs much easier. But there's nothing really to bring up in this demo here. Our pricing API, the example that I have here is, oops, I'm embarrassed. The example that I have here is extremely straightforward. We're calling our API endpoint, we give it the chain ID, and then we just give it the contract address. Okay, so all that said, it does exactly what it says on the box, right? This is my token price, this is the currency, and this is the on-chain price for that wrapped Ethereum token. The burden is not on you to extrapolate each individual token addresses because while Odos supports a large number of tokens, it's not infinite. I mean, we manage a whitelist. Okay, I think it has something like 60,000 tokens now, but it is a managed whitelist. If you want to see all the tokens that are available on a chain that we would be able to return prices for, you can do so with the chain ID endpoint here. Again, just reference our API endpoint documentation. This is a Swagger instance here. You expand it and you can see the parameters. However, it's pretty straightforward. The other thing I wanted to mention on the call is by default, we return currencies in USD, as many apps do out there. However, we're certainly not limited to USD. If you again refer to our API documentation and you expand our pricing currencies API endpoint here, you will see a list of all of our supported currencies. And it's quite long. So that may be applicable to you. A lot of our users may ask, where are we getting these Forex rates from? We use a third-party API to call, and it has extremely fast refresh rates. So you're not using yesterday's settlement or something like that. It's as real time as it can be.